Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. I am recording this on Saturday afternoon in San Francisco, USA, and I thought this would be a kind of unique and interesting moment for me to make my video this week because I just woke up from a nap. Now, this is unheard of for someone like me who sleep is both elusive and has always been something that I did not quite permit myself, couldn't quite accomplish, made me very much like everyone else in a way that I wasn't entitled to or didn't need. And so here I am waking up from a delicious hour and a half of afternoon sleep. And I woke up just awash with feelings and thoughts and images and things to talk to you about. So I thought, well, this will be a telling moment because maybe this is a sort of change of history for me. Maybe I'm sort of creating a new template where I can sleep in the afternoon or I can sleep, period. I remember as a little girl, I dreaded slumber parties, which most girls kind of enjoyed, but I dreaded the insomnia and the waking up hours before everyone else and not knowing what to do with myself in somebody else's home, in a sleeping bag on the living room floor among a bunch of sleeping girls. I felt so out of sorts, like a different species. And I also remembered my father, who always took a nap on Saturday afternoons. He always said, if you don't take a nap on Shabbat, that's the Saturday Sabbath in Judaism, you'll be tired all week. So here I am waking up from a delicious sleep on Saturday afternoon. And I woke up with this image that I haven't had in a very long time, from when I was 20 years old, which now is half a century ago almost, which seems like a very long time to me, except for in the memory is this experience I'd never had of timelessness, a kind of timelessness and connection to all of humanity that I'd never felt before. And here I was, 20 years old, with this new and different feeling of connection with the species, with the human race, with timelessness. And I remembered being up in the high Andes, the mountains of Peru, at Machu Picchu. Now, Machu Picchu is an ancient ruin of the Aztec Indians, way up there in the high regions of the Andes. And I was there, and I remember this wash of fog and this whispering of the wind and this memory or image of all these ancient, it was Incas, moving these vast stones and building this monument to timelessness that I was visiting at age 20 by myself during a really lonely, difficult time in my life. And it was one of the few, if not the first, times in my life when I feel something that now I've come to feel fairly often, which is a connection and an identification with people all over. People like you, who I don't know where you are, but you might be in some far reach of this world that I've never been to. Or maybe you're somewhere near, but somehow I feel this connection with you and with my ancestors and with our ancestors and with people through time. And I was having this sense, this timeless sense of connection. So I wanted to speak to you from there. And this morning, I heard a story on the radio where I often hear stories that pique my curiosity and my interest and my sort of generalizable thoughts about trauma and neglect and humanness and being a mammal in this world that we live in. And I heard this story. I can't remember the buzzwords that they were using in this story, but basically, what it boiled down to was a kind of climate despair among the young people, that they were so overcome with helplessness and fear and paralysis about the state of the planet that it made them hopeless in a way that made them want to die. And I thought, wow, that is so sad and so frightening. And it reminded me of when I first started to learn about neglect in my historic men's group that goes back to 1998. And I remembered that one of the signature elements that I came to identify as pieces of the neglect profile were not only this constant refrain of nothing happened to me, but this additional refrain of helplessness. There's nothing I can do. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And this panic almost about that, but a hopeless panic, as if there's no answer to the question. So I may as well freeze, collapse, disappear, which is precisely what the infant, the neglected infant, the child of neglect, is inclined to do. So not only does nothing matter, and nothing matters to me, but given that there's no other, there's nowhere to turn, there's no one to reach for, there's no one to ask, what do I do? I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do, which is what these young people start to feel about the sorry state of our planet. And from there, my mind started to wander. And I started remembering more about the men's group. And there was a man in the group. He was a quirky young guy, and he was on the younger end of the men in the group. And he was in some ways annoying, and he talked about things that none of us really could quite relate to. And one of the things that he talked about all the time was what he called, or what many people called in those days, global warming. And he was terribly worried about global warming and what to do about the planet heating up and what that meant for not only humanity, but all organic life, all life on this planet, and how we were dooming ourselves to a kind of demise by not taking care of the planet. And he was really passionate about that, that in a way that the rest of us found kind of idiosyncratic and weird. And he was kind of God-forsaken. He lost all his money, and so he didn't have that much to begin with. But the little bit that he had was gone forever. And he was a strange and idiosyncratic guy and talked about things that we didn't quite understand. And he was vegan back when it was really unusual to know anyone that was vegan or to understand that. And he was the first of our group who died. He had some kind of very short lived cancer that took him from us, and then he was gone. And somehow I found myself remembering him because he, on one hand, was so riddled with this belief that there's nothing we can do. And on the other hand, he was so compelled and so electrical about how we have to do something about this because the planet is heating up and we are going to destroy ourselves. And now, fast forward 2025, and we're surrounded by exactly what he was talking about, this climate disaster, which he was warning us of. And somehow we couldn't hear it then. I couldn't hear it then. And we, certainly the men in the group, we all kind of tuned him out or kind of chalked it up to something quirky and weird and oh well, that's him. But we loved him. We loved him because he was one of us and we were these pioneers in learning about neglect, and he was very much one of us. So I found myself remembering him and remembering Machu Picchu as I reflected on this story that I heard this morning about how many young people are mired in despair about the state of this planet that they're inheriting. And here we are surrounded by these climate disasters. And daily we're hearing about fires and storms and cold and heat and these terrible moments in time that seem so big and so, on one hand, compelling, like we've got to do something about this before it's too late. And on the other hand, this fear that it's too late, or this neglect refrain of, what do we do? There's nothing we can do. I don't know what to do. And this young generation that is somehow overtaken by that feeling. And there's been a rash of either despair and despondency and paralysis, or lapse into some kind of escapism, or even some kind of self destructive impulse that's really sad. And then I was reminded of this iconic image that I often use in my work that encapsulates the neglect experience, which is nothing matters, which is the essence of neglect. This universe of nothing, this lonely, bleak emptiness of nothing, this isolation, this untethered despair, the helplessness. There's nothing I can do. I don't know what to do. What do I do? There's no one to ask. There's no one to tell. There's no one to reach for. There's nowhere to turn. Nowhere. Nothing. Loneliness. And loneliness is the very essence of it. And I started then to reflect on this journey, this recent journey that I've been on, where breaking my arm, I felt awash in despair. But I also felt something different from what that little girl at the slumber parties felt. Something different about what I felt from what I felt so much of my life. A feeling of not being alone, being connected, of feeling supported, like there's help, there's somewhere to turn, there's something to do, there's something I can do. I can talk to you. I can reach for the support of my angels, of which now I have many. Something I never imagined I could feel before. A sense that there is someone there, that I'm not different, that I'm very much like so many others. And the essence of what makes me feel so weird and so isolated and so cut off and so hopeless is this fear and this conviction that there's no one there. Now I know that there is, and you're there, and I'm here, and there's this essential way, this primordial way, much like the Incas, much like the Aztecs, much like my father, who, wherever he may be, leaves me with these essential memories, positive and negative, about history and how I must do something. I can't collapse into despair, hopelessness, paralysis, inaction. I must do something. And the essence of this program that I heard this morning was how this younger generation is lapsing into a despair of paralysis where they don't want to act. They don't care. They don't believe they can act. And they give up. We can't have that. We can't have that. And the fact is, what I'm discovering and what they were talking about in this program is what awakens us, and what awakens us to hope, and what awakens us to action is a feeling of being connected through time, through space, through all the ways that we imagine that we're different. And we are in many ways. And in many ways, we're not. And the speaker was talking about how these elemental ways of connecting, whether it be through taking care of plants, or making food, or making music, or some or other kind of timeless activity that reminds us that we're part of a legacy that doesn't begin or end with us. And we have something to add. And we have something to gain, something to give, something to receive. And the essence of nothing is precisely the opposite of that. This feeling that there's no one there. I'm out there by myself. I now know that I'm not, that you're there, that I'm here, that you're listening to me, and maybe my words speak to you in some way, maybe not this time, but maybe you have words that speak to someone else. So somehow this breath of life and eternity and timelessness and time and organicity and connection and support, which is what makes the world go round, which is what makes life worth living. It continues. It goes on. It goes on in ways that I never imagined. And now I know in my body, I know in my bones, and my bones heal. And my arm is so much better. And partly why it's so much better is because of you and my connection to others that somehow keeps me going and keeps me at it in ways that I don't give up. And there's something I must do, and I keep doing it. And then I heal, and you heal. And we do something to keep things moving in this sorry world which can readily invite despair and nothingness. This nothing is not nothing. This nothing is something. And this nothing is what helped me discover something really important, which I share with you. So I invite you to stay connected with me, with your children, with your ancestors, with your pets, with your plants, with your food, with this world which moves into what for many is the year of the snake. And I've never been fond of reptiles, but the snake we need to consider. And for the Greeks, the snake symbolized healing and some kind of medical working together, which is what is healing my arm and many other things. So the year of the snake, time goes on. I speak to you. You speak to whoever is in your sphere to speak to, all of which is something, not nothing, but something. So I apologize for being all over the place today. Maybe this is the result of afternoon sleep or taking my father's advice. But maybe it's magical. Maybe it's worthwhile. And finally, you'll notice, even if it's backward on your screen, that I'm wearing my Oxford shirt, which Oxford is an important part of my life, always was, because my grandmother graduated from there way back in the early 1900s. And I've been back a couple of times and will be again, and maybe I'll see some of you at the Oxford Trauma Conference, which we're now preparing for again. So I leave you with that. I invite you to join us in Oxford. And if not that, I invite you to join us in this vast movement of connecting through time and space and similarity and universality and timelessness, and this sense that you matter and I matter, and together we matter and we keep going. So thank you for joining me again in this moment in time, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.